We are recording. All right, good morning, everyone. Minutes of our June 13th meeting. Anyone have any changes or corrections to make? If not, will someone make a motion to accept? Dave?
I'll second.
Sue? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Budget report is attached. Up top on the revenue side, interest earnings, and the other number is how much we had to transfer from our main account to pay the balance of the bills shown on the bottom. On the expenditure side, salaries for both myself and our CFO, unemployment insurance payment that was made, a $7,600 payment to Environmental Design Partnership for their work. A payment from $1,600 for the Tryon Technology Park Generator Project. $873 for work on the IDA website, and another miscellaneous payment for all of those items listed on the agenda for $503. And that was it for the month. Any questions on the budget report for this month? I'm done. Does someone make a motion to accept it?
So motion.
Todd, Joe, any further questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Committee reports, Joe Savion,
Yes,
monthly bank reconciliations, how they look?
they look wonderful, many pages, but she sends them 2-3 days ahead of time and have time to review them. They are all in order.
Very good. CRG report, Mr. Green.
This said that this was already attached.
Yes, it is. We have the full report attached to our agenda,
Okay,
all 3 pages of it.
I could forward it to you as you go over the 20, but I won't. I'll still over.
If you do, you can leave now.
I'll do myself. Just 3 of them seem to be the most important to me. I called over Desiree and Ron. Number 2. The countywide EPA assessment program, they've worked their way down to 3 priority sites, and 2 of which are being worked on. They seem like good sites to me. At this point, it's confidential where they are, what they are, but they're going to be starting with phase 2. So I should say they're going to be starting with phase 2. They completed the plans for phase 2. But work is going to be started fairly soon, if not already. That's good. Number 6. CRG was invited, moderated this breakout training called Tools and Best Practices for Site Development at the New York State Economic Development Council site. It was in Cooperstown. Ron said it was a terrific event, largest to date. And he said to me, and he did put a note in here, that you guys might consider going to that next time. And the reason that he said that was because there are resources available there. And apparently, we as a collective, Fulton County IDA, CRG, that sort of have a pretty good reputation there. So we thought that if you guys could make it the next time, it would probably be helpful for you guys. Number 7 is the other one. Ron was pretty proud of the fact that they've got a nice award. Mohawk, as you can see, the Mohawk Valley Brownfield Developers Summit event. They received the New York State EDC Excellence in Marketing Award, and both CRG and Mohawk Valley Economic Development District accepted the award, and he was pretty proud of that. And one thing that wasn't in this 20 is that I think it's actually maybe the first part of the PRI is completed. And that is Jen Donovan sent out a thing about the splash pad downtown, so it's actually already open. So the grand opening is gonna be, Saturday, July 15th at 10 a.m. So that's a nice event, and I know that, Mayor DeSantis is looking forward to, developing that whole area, and, Jen is a big part of that, obviously, is the development specialist. So that's, we have to say for now.
Very good. Thanks, Warren. Any questions for Warren on the CRG report? Just I drove by there. That splash pad last week, it would be heavily used by young children.
Awesome.
And are you guys moving your offices,
Well,
or we don't know, or it's top secret, so?
as of right now, I would say maybe, but maybe not also.
Okay.
That's
The
good.
person who bought it is talking to us
About,
about staying.
Staying there,
but
okay.
We'll see, I know that Ron is looking.
Okay.
We'll see. He's ruled a couple of places out. He's ruled a couple of places out. So, as of right now, we're there.
Did the closing get postponed?
But that,
Did the closing get postponed? That's when I was at your last meeting, you were hoping it was like July 7th.
yeah, it was not for long. I think a couple, the Warriors get fouled, and a couple of was tied, there's the clear reference for us.
There's
But it'll be fine. Yeah, it looks like it's still. Very good. The other thing, just quick as an aside, which is here, the Baseball Hall of Fame, New York State Baseball Hall of Fame is gonna have an opening on July, let's say the 29th, the end of this month. And, anybody is welcome to attend. Should be quite the show. Apparently, a few major league, ex-major league players are gonna be there. Apparently, Bob Costas is gonna be there. So it's gonna be a pretty big.
That'd be cool.
Pretty big opening.
Very good. Thanks, Warren.
Okay.
All right, on their old business, Nexus Renewables, I received documentation from them that they have made their payments to National Grid for Grid to conduct the interconnect study that has to be done on its proposed project at Triumph. For Grid's policy, they take 60 business days to complete this thing called the Coordinated Electric System Interconnection Review. So they're expecting to receive Grid's approval for the interconnect in the third quarter of this year. And once the interconnect approval is received, Nexus will then proceed to getting quotes to actually construct the facility. The likelihood is that the work won't start until 2024. Any questions on the Nexus project?
Yes, on that, are they gonna have to clear, obviously clear that site?
Yes,
They're hanging, are we the timber?
minimal.
Okay.
Minimal. But there may be some pine, but that's about it. Okay. For Wind Stanley, continued to having dialogue with National Grid regarding bringing more power to Triumph. Couple of options I have identified. There's a preferred option that's being looked at, but nothing's been finalized with that. And we have another conversation scheduled for later this month. Correct, Sue?
Is Nexus and Winstanley, the grid projects interrelated anyhow? So cost sharing could be, no?
Completely separate projects.
Solar projects actually don't really add capacity. So it doesn't help the possible tenants.
Our backup generator project is still proceeding, waiting for Cobalt to complete the punch list, which has been sent to them. And once that's done, we have final payments can be issued. Burial health, nothing has really changed. I can update the board on a few other things in executive session when we get there.
Backup generator project, and then a plan will be developed to turn it over to the county.
It's already been done.
It's already been done.
We've already turned over the documents.
So,
So ownership is now in the hands of Fulton County Sewer District that we're going.
okay, great.
The island sewer business.
So the monthly
And power
bills,
business.
the monthly bills, for operating are now being paid by the district.
Excellent.
Okay, moving on, the last piece of old business is our mission statement, which we've been discussing for a couple of months now. There's been a discussion about shortening our mission statement, and listed on the agenda are some of the suggestions that were tossed out at our last meeting. So on top is what our current mission statement consists of, and then listing there are 5 potential new statements that would significantly reduce what our mission statement says. Personally, as I've looked at these and debated these and thought about them, I think we have to strike a balance between shortening and shortening too much. And, you know, that's a gray area in terms of, you know, we incentivize opportunities. What kind of opportunities? Does that lead, is there a degree of unknown there? Ambiguity. And again, it's just a balance I think we need to talk about.
So I like D.
No, go ahead, Joe.
I like D myself. It's sort of D or E. I mean, it shows that they have sites and then we give incentives. I mean, so gives a twofold approach of what we can do. Go ahead, Dave. I'm sorry.
You know, this whole thing came out of that workshop that Scott and Greg and myself attended, and you know, the idea was that the mission statements oftentimes are just so wordy that you kind of get lost in all of the verbiage, and sometimes the statement ends up kind of being a meandering sort of mess of concepts. And the recommendation was to simplify it in order to really kind of focus the organization's intentions when it comes to making decisions. You know, one could look at this as less a changing of the mission statement and more of creating a tagline that supports the mission statement. And, you know, so it's not necessarily about communicating all the detail of what we do. It's about simplifying the concept of the purpose of our organization. You know, any of these would be fine. As far as I'm concerned, though the 3 words of we incentivize opportunities for me kind of sings. But I, you know, based on how this has been developing, I would say that, you know, we could kind of really just sort of use this as sort of a tagline that's put on our website. We can put a little thing here that reminds us what our purpose is when we're reviewing opportunities. And then we have the power to discern what those opportunities are that we want to incentivize. But you know, I'm willing to go with whatever everybody else feels is reasonable. I'm not suggesting we throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak.
I mean, looking at our mission statement, I mean, it's 5 lines. I mean, I have it a little bit, but to me, that does thoroughly explain what we do. So, I mean, is every county looking to shorten theirs, Dave? Do you think was that what they were trying to do, or
It was
just gonna leave? Just going to leave based on a seminar, or I mean, but I just read.
You're not obligated to do anything.
Right.
You know, it just, what Dave is saying is that, you know, there was a conference attended by, you know, ID members from across New York State, and that was the topic of conversation. It was a suggestion, a recommendation given by that presenter or presenters that, you know, consideration should be given to simplifying, you know, and I sent around a month or so ago the mission statements from a half a dozen, and they're long. Okay, does that make them wrong? No. Does it make them right? No, it's just that's what they chose to do, you know, and so if we wanted to change it to we incentivize opportunities, again, would that be wrong? No. You know, so a tagline, I think is an interesting approach here. You know, we keep the existing mission statement, but then we put on our website and we put on our letterhead someplace, we incentivize opportunities, like a marketing.
So, you know, think of it this way, it's not quite an elevator speech, but it's, you know, you're stuck in an elevator with somebody and you they discover that you're on the IDA and say, oh, that's interesting. What do you do in the IDA? Well, do you try to remember the 5 lines of the mission statement, which is unlikely because I haven't memorized it. What's that?
You got a tattoo.
Yeah. That's very creative. I expected that from you, John.
Being a chairman.
Oh, okay. Well, I missed that day. I have to wait for executive session to see it. Please no. So I think the idea of a tagline is you can very simply and quickly say, we incentivize opportunities. And then that begets, well, what kind of opportunities? And then that starts a conversation that isn't so driven by a script as much as it is driven by a concept of what we do. And, you know, what I think this is coming from, what's driving this is that a lot of IDAs have been constituted under the idea or the original idea that it was only for industrial development. And as we have discussed, there are opportunities that maybe go beyond strict industrial development that IDAs can be a part of those projects. But we as board members need to be keeping in mind, you know, what are those opportunities that matter for economic development in our region? And, you know, what they were recommending is, you know, to simplify the mission statement so it's a little easier to remember. And it's a little easier to communicate to people who are not familiar with the work of the IDA. And then to even maybe have a little placard put somewhere in the meeting space as sort of that reminder of, you know, this is what we do. And to keep that sort of fresh in our minds every time we're considering a project. So that was really the basis of it. I like the idea. You know, I think there are things that we carry from our history. It's not just the IDA. A lot of organizations deal with this. They're formulated, you know, sometime in the 20th century, and they carry these, you know, longevity sort of characteristics and histories with them. After a while, I think we start to migrate a little bit away from that on purpose, and we evolve and we figure out new ways to conduct our business. And it seemed to me, coming out of that meeting, the IDAs that seemingly had a lot of things going for them were finding ways to modernize how they're approaching the general public and how they're approaching themselves and how they communicate about themselves. So not wanting to be left in the dust, I thought that might be something we want to consider.
I like the idea of a tagline. So I have a question. Oh, didn't the county come up with a tagline not too long ago?
County positive.
Could I say something as a first timer looking at this?
We want.
I look at it and C jumped out to me right away with one more word. I thought we incentivize economic development. I mean, that just kind of jumped out at me in some ways, but that's just from outside, first timer looking at it.
And I looked at C and said, just add a different, we're just kind of combining with A and say we incentivize development opportunities. But I think a tagline would be nice, you know, like you said, could put something on the back, but also on the website.
That to me is where it has a lot
Yes.
more impact, I
Yeah.
think.
And I can see it, we would put this at the bottom of our letterhead. Okay, so every page, everything that we there would have that on.
Put it on the application form.
Put on the application form. I'd have a little banner made right here that we'd hang in this room, just so you guys see it every time you get in here. Okay, put it on our website.
I can shorten it here too.
Well, do we do board training? We gotta make sure, the new board member's gotta be tattooed. So it sounds like there's a consensus that a tagline is kind of preferred.
Sounds good to me.
With that, which one do you want? What do we? Can we reach a consensus on
Mike,
which
what
one?
did you say?
I said kind of combine A and C to say we incentivize development opportunities.
That's fine with me.
Works for me.
You make that a form of a motion?
I will make that in the form of a motion.
Is there a second to that? Dave?
I'll second.
Very good. All in favor, say aye. Anyone opposed? Very good. All right, last item of business here in open session will be our board training, where we're going to chat about our uniform tax exemption policy. I'd like to reverse what's on the agenda. Let's go to item B. As I've researched UTEPs from other counties, and this all goes back to our ongoing discussion about incentivizing housing projects. All right. And how other IDAs are doing that. And as part of that research, what I have found is that a number of other counties have definitions in their UTEPs for certain types of projects that they try to incentivize. And we don't have these types of definitions. For example, an adaptive reuse project. It's a type of project we would love to see. And I think it's something we would look to incentivize here in the county. But again, we don't list it as a specific project to make sure that our UTEP, if that type of a project came to us, that, it says that we can incentivize that type of a project. Affordable housing was another one. Senior housing project, tourist destination projects. Again, those are specific projects that right now in our UTEP, they're not specifically identified. So we would have to interpret, right, whether they meet our ability to incentivize that project. Whereas if we had them as specifically defined terms in our UTEP and then specifically said we will incentivize these types of projects, the ambiguity is gone. So I'm recommending that we add these terms to our UTEP.
And this is something that others,
Yes.
in a more broader sense, not just one or two cherry pick
Correct.
ones.
Correct. So with that as a starting point, if we could go to the attachment to your agenda that says payment in lieu of tax agreements. Okay. So what I did was I went and just picked 9 or 10 counties and looked at their uniform tax exemption policies. From the standpoint of this, as we've talked, right now, our uniform tax exemption policy says we have one type of pilot we would grant, 485B, but can deviate from that if the circumstances dictate. Okay. Whereas other counties have specific pilots for different types of projects, and they're articulated in their UTEPs. So that's what I want to go through, because we know what we're doing now is what we have been doing and can continue to do it. But the alternative is to look at how some other counties do it. And I'm just going to go through some of these really reasonably quick. And then when we get to the end, my question to this board is, do you want to continue to do what we're doing and just have one policy and then deviate as necessary? Or would you like to progress into having different types of pilots specified in your UTEP for different types of projects? Okay, so let's start with Saratoga County. All right, they have pilots for manufacturing under A, pilots for commercial projects under B, and then you flip the page, pilots for commercial retail projects. So if you look under the first one for manufacturing projects, they break it down from new facilities to existing facilities. Under new facilities, all right, again, it shall be, the exempt from local property tax at a rate of 50 to 100, so they leave a range. So basically, for each project that comes in, one might get 50, one might get 60, one might get 80, you know, they allow for that flexibility, depending upon the particular needs of of a project. So they've broken it down into all of these different components and have different pilots that can be granted for the different types of projects. Go to Montgomery County, on the bottom, starting on the bottom of page 2. They give pilots for new construction. They break it down by new construction. You flip the page, existing facilities currently, and leased facilities. Okay, and again, different types of pilots for the different types of projects. Okay.
Can I just ask a question about it?
Yep.
Saratoga County is involved with retail
And Montgomery County is not.
and Montgomery says no.
Correct. And
That's just,
that's
they're
their
just, okay.
individual choice. Okay? I'm glad you saw that, Joe, because that was, that's what's neat with all these, that everyone sets it up differently.
Yeah.
Okay? Going on to Oneida County on page 4. Okay? They break it down for pilots for industrial and manufacturing projects. Here's retail. They incentivize retail projects. And then other non-industrial / commercial projects. Again, all with different types of pilots for different types of projects. Go to Cattaraugus County, bottom of page 4. Pilots for regular manufacturing projects.
That's pretty generous. 100%. for
Yeah, 15 years.
That's,
That's what you're competing against. Pilots for enhanced manufacturing. Pilots for tourism destination facilities. So here's a county that has specific pilots for tourist destination facilities.
Where is this county? I'm not quite sure.
Western part of the county,
Or state.
western part of New York State, I'm sorry. Okay, all right,
Wow.
look under D for pilots for residential facilities, 0. They identify residential projects, but basically say the initial period should be 0 years. So they're like Montgomery County not incentivizing retail, Cattaraugus does not incentivize residential. Okay, but yet they do incentivize retail. But it's amazing how much they break it down. You go to the next page, qualified commercial facilities renovations, qualified commercial facilities new construction. Keep going to the next page 7, brownfield redevelopment project. Well, we have a few of those, don't we? Like, should that be, you know, again, I would toss that out for consideration. Should that be something that we would want to have as a separate project? And here's one, adaptive reuse project. Okay, so if you look back, so they've got 6 or 7 different types of pilots. Chemung County. Pilots for standard commercial, for manufacturing, retail tourist destination projects. Again, different types of pilots. Allegheny, pilots for all projects not included in the other two categories. So most of their pilots are under A, but if they have pilots for adaptive reuse and tourist destination projects. I think you get the point. I don't need to go on any further. And so we just saw 8 or 10 counties that have different pilots for different types of projects. Our UTEP says one pilot is our standard pilot, but we could deviate for an adaptive reuse project, this project and that project and this project, but what we would give would be determined on a case-by-case basis. Okay. So my question to this board is, do you wish to retain our current practice, our current UTEP the way it's drafted? Or would you be interested in considering different pilots for different types of projects?
So if I could kind of just jump in with that lead in, You know, the interesting thing I find with each of these individual project types being characterized or classified in some way, defined in some way, it gives the potential applicant an opportunity to really sort of calculate their potential savings right from the beginning. They can build a pro forma around that. With ours, they get a standard rate, but they don't know if we're going to come at them with something different until they make the application and come before us to pitch their idea. So I would be in favor of defining things a little bit. However, we feel that's appropriate, I think is up for debate, but I would like to see us kind of break things out a little bit and be more definitive with project types.
And just the brownfield, so that Sue and I were at. There was a lot of discussion about the funding stack. No, you've got your owner's equity, you've got state grant programs, sometimes federal grant programs. But part of that too was incentives from IDAs. And as we've said, we've got a number of brownfield sites in the county. No, I'd be supportive of that being a designated section, and maybe we give a little better incentives for readaptive use, brownfield remediation, redevelopment, those type projects. And I also think, half of this county is within the blue line of the Adirondack Park, and tourism is something that the County Board of Supervisors wants to help grow as part of our economic base. So I think that's another breakout that we should be looking at. And then, we've talked about housing too.
Right.
So, yeah.
So, I think ultimately what we're talking about is getting these definitions to align with the economic development plan that the county has set forward. And I think you've mentioned all of them. The idea of distinguishing between new and existing to me is more about if it's new, the whole project is potentially incentivized. If it's existing, it's whatever improvement. I think you simply just define it as almost like an overlay district and a zoning kind of idea, but
Benjamin Moore is a good example of that.
right. So I wouldn't think we have to have separate rates set up for new versus existing. But I think the idea of identifying specific sort of development types that we would want to incentivize would be pretty good.
We'll continue this discussion. What I'll come back to you with next month is a suggested list of the types of projects that we should have individual pilots for. Okay, and if we agree to that, then I'll come back and suggest the types of pilots based upon what we're seeing in the marketplace, and just continue this dialogue. And hopefully in a couple of meetings, what I would then come back to you is with a motion to amend our UTEP to add in all these definitions and add in all of these different types of pilots.
I will say that just looking at Cattaraugus real quick, that's way out there in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
And so I can understand why they're offering 100% relief on their projects, because they're just trying to get people to move there. I wouldn't say that we have to be in that space, but we're also not Saratoga, where we're, we kind of maybe want to throttle that down a little bit. Right. So
I definitely think we should try to incentivize the brownfields.
yeah.
So we get that, that's.
Yep. And new brownfield tourists and housing.
Yeah.
Along with there, so it's probably maybe 4 categories.
And the other thing, Warren, is is the county amenable to giving away free taxes for 10 years?
Well, that's an interesting question, because there's 20 of us. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Different folks.
Yeah, everyone.
In different.
But that's buying into the myth that pilots aren't doing any benefit to anything.
Right.
The idea is to incentivize these projects by reducing the tax. But you're still enhancing the value of the property. You're getting more through the development of that property than if it was not developed. That's the essence of what your rebuttal was to the newspaper article, right?
And that draft article I sent around to everybody, that's what it was attempting to try and
Right. We're not giving away free. We're
no, and that's the one thing, Warren, with IDA projects, IDAs are tax exempt.
Right.
So we own all this property, these shovel-ready sites that local taxing jurisdictions, including the county, are generating zero tax revenues from right now.
Anyways, right.
So when we have a project come in, say, burial out in at the Tryon Technology Park, when that project comes in, and well, that's not a good one because we didn't grant a pilot for that, but theoretically, if we did, the pilot doesn't apply to the assessed valuation of the land.
Right.
So just that increase starts generating tax revenue for all three taxing jurisdictions. With our standard pilot of 50%, whatever that the local assessor establishes as the assessed valuation, in year one, 50% of that total assessed valuation is going to be generating tax revenues for those local taxing jurisdictions. So, we go from zero to at least 50% of the improvements, 100% on the land. So taxing jurisdictions start generating revenues from day one on projects.
Right.
Well, there's this belief out there that pilots take away revenues from the taxing jurisdiction, and it's not. What they do is it minimizes how much new revenue you're going to generate as opposed to if it was,
Years, right.
all right, but it is generating new revenues for local taxing jurisdictions.
As one of 20,
Mhm.
I'm pretty much where Chairman Fitzgerald was in the three different areas he'd like to see. And with Joe, I'm 100% with him. My emphasis would be on the brownfield.
Mhm.
So that's where I am. But
Well, I will
I'm
add,
one of 20.
I will add a definition for brownfield projects as a separate term. Todd, you're gonna.
Well, I'd like to also consider reuse because we have many buildings that are sitting vacant that potentially could be developed into something positive. And if we emphasize that as well.
Well, would adaptive reuse?
Yeah.
Would that kind of that term? I've got that listed in there for that purpose. That was the intent, was to take an existing facility and put it back into use.
Right.
So the question will then be, can they layer two different types of pilots on a project? If they're gonna put, like, the CRG building is available and somebody bought that to do an adaptive reuse, converting it from office space back to manufacturing. Could they take a manufacturing pilot and an adaptive reuse pilot? So I'm just saying, we wanted to define those things so they don't come in expecting, hey.
And that's one of my concerns. Are we getting too boxed in? Right now, we have a ton of flexibility in what our pilot says, other than the rate remains the same for every project. Right? But we have a lot of flexibility. We can do any one of these subtitles today,
But we would
but we
start,
haven't assigned a different pilot rate to each of them.
well, there's two issues. The first is, right now, our UTEP says that we can incentivize projects that are listed in the law. Okay? And some of these projects, like, there's not a separate term for example, an adaptive reuse or a brownfield project. The law doesn't identify that as a separate use. It identifies another, certain types of definitions. So you would have to issue an interpretation. Okay, there is some degree of ambiguity there that you would have to say, okay, this project here, it's an adaptive reuse project, but the law doesn't identify that as a type of use. So how would you fit that adaptive reuse project into one of the uses that the law currently says you can incentivize?
Mhm.
Well, so the first issue is changing our UTEP to identify all these specific types of projects and say we will incentivize them. So it would take the guesswork out of step one. Whenever you get a project, does your UTEP allow you to incentivize this type of a project? All right,
Okay.
and by adding these definitions and saying in there that we will incentivize these types of projects, step one is you can now incentivize them.
Along with what's in the law.
Along with what's in the law.
Okay, so you start with the law and then you further define.
And then the second
Okay.
step is,
Okay.
do you want to have one UTEP or one pilot with the deviations? Or what we're talking about is several
Right.
different types of pilots for several different types of projects.
That's when those conversations will get dicey.
That's when they will.
Everyone's aware.
Right, well, you're correct, and I think I've heard, and I certainly, I would never be advocating any pilot that's gonna have 100% exemption.
Oh, yeah,
No,
No,
I don't think anybody here would want to see that.
no. Okay, so,
Well, our number one priority is to create jobs. Creating taxes for the counties and schools and it shouldn't be as high as creating jobs.
Well, but again, some of the evolution of what, economic development, EDC is recommending is you broaden the idea. It's not just jobs you're creating, it's economic development, which is a whole spectrum of benefits to the community to support the community's ability to exist. You know, you gotta have retail, you gotta have solid residential. These are all things that I think can easily be defended as being economic benefits to the community, whether it's driving jobs or stabilizing or recruiting new, manufacturers, retail, whatever. Yes, jobs are a big part of that, but focusing only on jobs as an issue overly narrows, I think, the scope of potential benefit that I think they're trying to open our eyes to.
and Joe, when you go back to our mission statement.
yeah,
Okay, it says that our mission is to create jobs and expand the county's tax base. It doesn't say one's more important than the other.
Right.
It's both of those. Okay, we gotta move along here. We'll continue this discussion at our next meeting, but for now, that's all we have for open session. I'd like to call the executive session for the purpose listed in the bottom of page 5. Can someone make a motion? Joe, thank you. Mike, thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? We're going into executive session at 8:42 a.m.
Thank you, Warren.
Thank you. This meeting is Tuesday, August 8th. Do we have a motion to, what are we? Yes, we're back in recording. Motion to close?
I'll close.
Sue, second. Joe,
yes.
It's a thing
all in
now.
favor, say aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned at 10 o'clock. Thank you, folks.
Take care. Bye, Karen.
Everyone, have a good day.
Close the meeting without saying and making the vote.
Exactly.
It's like-
Tradition.
Yes, thank you.